Sometimes tackling an old but underserved part of the market can make the most impact. That's what NetRise is doing, and their co-founder and CEO Tom Pace joins me to talk about why is their market underserved, the reaction from prospects when they realize it can actually be solved, their biggest sales challenge right now, and also how Tom's first computer he ever had as a kid was from a brand that doesn't exist anymore, bought from a store that doesn't exist anymore. But don't go away. Welcome to the Sales Bluebird podcast, where we help cybersecurity companies grow sales faster. I am cybersecurity go-to-market guy, Andrew Monaghan. Our guest today is Tom Pace, co-founder and CEO at NetRise. Tom, welcome to Sales Bluebird.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this because we've got a lot of common connections. You spent a bunch of time at Cylance, and I was at McAfee. Never Cylance, but a lot of the McAfee folks went to Cylance. And secondly, you're tackling a part of the industry which it seems to me anyway. You can correct me. Not many people are thinking about, or at least tackling right now. And I think it's probably a part of the industry that's based on some assumptions that don't necessarily need to be true. So I'm going to test my thought with you when we get to that point in the discussion.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an emerging space within cybersecurity and in a market that is, I guess you would call it nascent and ripe for disruption. So we're excited about the opportunity.
Well, let's look at your background, Tom. I'm going to use LinkedIn as the source of truth about what you've been doing for your whole career. I'm going to try and summarize this as effectively as I can. You started off in the
Sure.
Marine Corps back in the early 2000s. Spent about 4 years there. Came out of there, did a little bit around. Looks like kind of police, crime units, forensics, things like that. And your first real, I don't know if it's quite true, first real tech job, PNC Bank, where you were an analyst and then an incident response investigator. And between PNC and your next stop at Floor, you were involved a lot in IDS, it sounded like, network-based IDS and also host IDS. That was over, it looks like, about 5 or 6 years between the two companies. And then from there, you made probably quite a big decision, a big movement in your career to join Cylance, where you ended up running their worldwide consulting organization. Of course, we all know Cylance was acquired by BlackBerry. You went over to BlackBerry and held a role there for almost 2 years. And then fast forwarding a little bit, we go to officially January 2021, when you said now is the perfect time to go and be the founder, co-founder of my own company. Take us back to that moment in time when you and your co-founders were, whatever you're doing, sitting around the campfire, going, you know what, we should start something.
Yeah. I mean, it had been an idea for a number of years to kind of do my own thing. But I was very happy at Cylance. I really liked it there. I've said many times, if we didn't get acquired, I probably would have never left. I probably wouldn't have. My life was great. It was just awesome. And then we got acquired, and listen, BlackBerry's, they're a great company. I'm just not a big company guy. It's just not what I am. I never have been. I don't do well surrounded by so much structure. It's just not for me. It's not bad. It's just different. So that was really it for me. And so I've had to figure out, what do I want to do with my life? I can stay, or I can go to another company and basically do the same thing I was just doing, which certainly would have been more lucrative. Or I can take the opportunity to go do my own thing. And that's really the decision-making process. I think that a lot of people think it's this, I've been dreaming of starting a company my entire life. Couldn't be further from the truth. I'm certainly passionate about what we're doing and all of that. You have to be, otherwise it'll just never be successful. But that was like the motivator for me, was solving a hard problem and kind of being responsible for my own future. That's what was really interesting to me. And that's even evolved now since I've started the company. Like, man, I get so much more satisfaction around seeing the people that work at this company feel like they're doing something important, and feel like they are contributing to something and can see the output of their efforts in the product, in customer satisfaction, in whatever. And that's just really hard to get at big companies, right? Um,
Yeah,
so
I feel
I
like in
think,
big companies, you're part of a big apparatus. And at the end of the day, for most people in an organization, what they do isn't going to have a big impact on customer success in general. You obviously you're contributing towards it, but you can't sit there and go, "Yeah, that's what I did," right? Whereas at startups, you have to. There's no choice.
that's all there is.
That's all there is.
If you can't point and show me what you did, then I don't know what you're doing here.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
that,
So,
that's
how
exactly
easy
right.
was it to get your co-founders on board? And how did you know them?
Yeah, so I met my co-founder. There's just two of us, me and Mike. I met Mike at Cylance. Um, we built some stuff together there. We built like an incident response platform, and that turned into a black hat class that I taught for like 3 or 4 years. So that was really fun. And then Mike left and went to Tanium, where he built their EDR product, and was responsible for developing a lot of their machine learning patent stuff. And uh, you know, Mike and I just had a super unique relationship in terms of, number one, we're just two totally different human beings. You know, I mean, I have a technical background and all of that, but I'm not one millionth as technical as Mike. Um, you know, I've taken plenty of programming classes. I have never been a professional software developer in my life. Mike has done that his entire life. So, I'm just much more focused on the operations and go to market side of things and all of that. Mike is a product builder. So we just had a very complementary set of capabilities. And we were both super excited about stepping into the void, I guess, and trying to make it happen. Um, so, him and I just kept in close communication and kept the conversation going. And one day I was like, all right, it's time to do it. And of course, I've made this comment a bunch of times. Like, I given two options in my life, I've pretty rarely taken the easier one. Um, in fact, I can't really think of any time. And deciding to raise money during COVID is certainly one of those times. But we did it, got enough money to get out, and then since then it's been great.
Who's advising you through all this? Who are your mentors? You're like, God, I think this is a good idea, but I need someone who's done this before to guide me a little bit.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. My boss at the time, a guy named Steve, was very helpful. He had started a number of his own companies. uh Stuart McClure, the former CEO of Cylance, was amazing. A number of C-level folks that I worked with at Cylance or had started other companies, like the guy who hired me at Cylance is a guy named Eric Cornelius. By the time he left Cylance, he was the CTO. He's now the chief product officer of another startup now. A number of our like original investors were very helpful. A guy who's the CEO of Sevco, JJ Guy, was one of the people who, frankly, wouldn't be here without him. I don't think he made a boatload of introductions for me from a venture capital perspective. Um, and so without him, it's hard to imagine things would be where they are. Might have got there eventually, but he was really helpful there. So yeah, I mean, the idea that you do this kind of thing on your own is totally insane and impossible. You know, so it took a lot of people to get us where we are.
So then you get going, and was there a moment when you're through, I don't know, was product development or hiring when you're like, you know what, I think we might just pull this off. There's something here that is going to really be useful.
Yeah, for sure. a lot of things were happening from a macro perspective that were really good for us. Like the massive push around S bombs, software bill of materials that's come out is something we didn't plan on, obviously. Um, the legislation and all that around there, SZA, taking a very big active role in that space was really good. I mean, we've built an unbelievable team here, which has allowed us to build an unbelievable product. Um, so we're winning deals with massive companies that are not easy to sell to. And we've done that repeatedly now. So seeing that kind of result, we're barely 2 years into this thing is pretty crazy. And it's we're definitely solving a problem, I guess. So so yeah, it's I guess this is always the case, but uh, our challenge is just execution at this point. We have the team, we have the product, we have the processes in place. The market's there. We know who the personas are. Like, it's just execution. It's just an execution problem now. Um, so
Well, let's talk about NetRise itself. I'm going to do something a little bit different here, Tom. I'm going to go out on a limb here and explain to you what I think NetRise does, and let you tell me where I've got it
Right.
completely wrong or where I've got it
Perfect.
right. I'm a simple guy from Scotland, so I'm going to use simple words to explain it to myself as I'm doing this. So, what I saw looking at this was that we've got this whole class of devices out there that are in various stages of being old, sort of old, or relatively new. That the explosion of IoT come in, and many of them operate under the model of there shouldn't be much going on those devices except for just the core functions, and therefore the firmware becomes an important part of what they do, right? And that firmware might have been developed many years ago. It might have been developed with different practices involved to develop it, but the feeling so far has been, don't touch it, right, in case you break something. But still, we don't know, haven't known what's going on with that firmware, what's there, what have we learned in the last 5 years compared to when it was developed 10 years ago. And I think what NetRise is doing is coming in to shine a light on that whole class of devices and the firmware that runs them, so that people can make good operational versus risk-based decisions about, is there something we should do differently based on what we learned about that whole firmware environment. What have I got wrong?
No, I mean, I think that's a good generalized explanation of what we do. I mean, it's really about providing visibility and risk identification to a class of devices that historically has had none. And our initial focus has been on, this class of devices that we call XIoT, which stands for Extended Internet of Things, which is basically just an umbrella term that encompasses IoT. So, you know, security cameras, printers, smart things. Then you have industrial control systems, medical devices, embedded systems in vehicles, satellites, and telecommunications equipment. So those are kind of like the six device classes that we view as belonging to the umbrella of XIoT.
And then what did NetRise bring to the party then? What's the thing that is the innovation or the uniqueness that you have?
Yeah, so being able to automate the process of analyzing this firmware is very challenging. A lot of this work has been historically done via consulting engagements and things like that. Um, because it requires a very kind of specific set of skills and capabilities and analysis techniques that are not easy to acquire or grasp. Um, and so, however, the capability is needed everywhere, and it's not able to be consumed by everyone. And that's because people can't obviously afford to have an army of consultants come in and manually reverse engineer all of their firmware that is running on their thousands of devices. It's a totally unscalable approach. And so, what we are able to do is automatically, reverse engineer isn't even really the right word, because that's not actually what's kind of happening. We can do that, but I mean, it's more about getting visibility into the specific artifacts and file systems that exist within the firmware. So, and then going through that and enumerating all of the various components, and generating an SBOM, as I mentioned in the past, and then taking that SBOM and enriching it with vulnerability and exploit and threat intelligence information so that end customers have better ways to prioritize those vulnerabilities and risks above and beyond CVSS, which I think we've all agreed at this point is not adequate for doing that. And in addition, we provide visibility to a number of other artifacts that are important: public keys, private keys, certificates, credentials, misconfigurations, binary protections. We give you a search capability. You can export the data. You can do all of these different things due to it being a platform. So that's really what we're doing, is attempting to provide you with the same kind of visibility that you expect on like a laptop, desktop, or server, but for all of these other devices.
And before NetRise, was it just purely a consulting engagement? They bring in, was it pen testers or engineers to figure it all out, or were there other ways they were kind of doing it manually?
Yeah, so I mean, there were and are a small number of companies out there kind of going after this problem in a few different ways. In my opinion, it was and still is overwhelmingly done by consulting companies. If you took like all of the work that's happening globally or even in the United States, I would venture to bet there's more money being spent on consultants doing this work than on products doing this work, for a number of different reasons. That's obviously changing rapidly. Um, yeah, so that was the one approach, and then you'd have other approaches for companies that are building these devices where they could integrate in certain capabilities into their like DevSecOps pipelines and things like that. So that was like maybe the other approach you would have. But the vast majority of these things were just not being assessed or evaluated at all, I think would be a fair statement.
So ignore a little bit. We got other things to worry about, or they're paying probably hundreds of thousands of dollars to consultants to do it for them, and there's your budget for a purchase of NetRise, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And when you go to a
Yep.
company, who are you targeting? Who's the buyer? Who gets this?
Yeah. So we target multiple different customers. I would say our focus right now is definitely around the device manufacturers. They have the most pain in the space. Um, I guess like the way I talk about it is it's a painkiller for them, our platform, and we augment either their existing product security capabilities, or we can come in and kind of be their product security capabilities in a box. So anybody building a device, so building networking equipment or ICS devices or medical devices or cars or whatever. And then we also sell to the people who are just end users of those devices. The use cases are different. The value proposition is different. The pricing is different. Um, but we have built our platform in such a way that we can serve both of those customers. Now, over time, we'll have to, make adjustments and things like that for things that are very specific for an end user versus a device manufacturer. But as of right this second, we're basically using one platform to rule them all. And then we also sell to consulting companies. So companies, those same companies that are doing all that consulting work can now do 10 times as much consulting work, and provide 100 times more value. So there's an obvious value prop there.
Going back to the manufacturers, you said you remove a pain for them. What's that pain? Are they on the hook to know all this and they just can't do it then?
Yeah. So if you think about something like Log4j as an example, the overwhelming majority of companies do not have a way in which they can determine where number one, if they have that component somewhere, and if so, where is it? And if we have it and we know where it is it vulnerable? And if we know where it is and we have it and it's vulnerable, is it vulnerable in the context of the device? So these are a lot of questions that you need to be able to answer like very rapidly. Um, so that's one part of it. You also have just the general SBOM problem where they have their end customers uh, demanding or requesting, whatever word you want to use, the list of ingredients that make up a particular device. So that's the ability to prioritize the risks and vulnerabilities using something other than CVSS, as I mentioned, and then identifying risks such as open source license misuse or violations. Like, I mean, there's, 20, 30 different things that we can provide them all in one spot that also assists from like a tool and product consolidation perspective at the end of the day.
Before we go any further, Tom, let's get to know you a little bit better. I've got a list of questions right here. I'm going to ask you to pick three numbers between 1 and 35, and I'll read out the questions they correspond to.
17.
17. What's the first computer you ever owned?
Um, I think it was I think it was like a gateway desktop. I was in seventh grade, sixth or seventh grade. I'm 38, so what year was that? 1996, 1997. Uh, and man, I think we bought it from Circuit City or something like that.
There's two
Um,
names that don't exist anymore, Gateway and
yeah,
Circuit City.
yeah, oh yeah. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I remember it just blowing my mind. Um, and then I spent a lot of time
Were you
playing.
gaming or tinkering around or what?
Yeah, I played a couple games on it at the time, but I was more tinkering around more than anything. I was one of those people who I clicked on every possible thing there was to click on to figure out how stuff worked, and I quickly realized that you know you could do some things that were fun and interesting that probably weren't meant to be done, kind of thing. So that was fun. I was one of the kids messing around with all the you know getting all the AOL CDs and getting more free minutes and all that other stuff. So that was fun. Dealing with terrible dial-up internet connections and people can't be on the phone and all of those challenges that no longer exist
Yeah.
from a computing perspective. But yeah, all over the place.
I love that though. That's launched a career, your Gateway PC right there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I kind of always knew I'd end up in cybersecurity, which is a weird thing, I guess. But
All right, one more number between 1 and 35.
29,
29. Tea or coffee?
coffee.
Strong coffee? How many cups a day?
Think I'm on my fourth.
Ooh, you're a coffee lover then.
Man, I like coffee. Uh, it's it's like a habit more than a. I don't need it. Trust me. I'm I'm wound pretty tight as it is. Uh, Coffee is not what I need. I'm always drinking something, whether it's coffee or like a sparkling water or something. But yeah, I drink a lot of it. But I'm not one of those people. I don't care about going to Starbucks or any of that. Like, just you know,
So you
I
enjoy
don't. I
the
don't need
habit,
to
you
feel it.
enjoy the kind of like the ritual, right? You make coffee,
Yeah,
it's nice coffee and you enjoy it, but you're not
that's it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not. I'm not like a coffee snob or anything like that. Like,
right.
great coffee is great, but good coffee is equally as great to me most of the time. So,
Cool. Last number between 1 and 35.
33.
33. Oh, you can't pick your own company. Which cybersecurity company do you admire right now?
Hmm. What cybersecurity company do I admire right now? Um, I guess I'm a big fan of uh what Tenable is doing. Um, they are building this thing called Platform One, and they have like a, in my opinion, a unique set of capabilities that have come together from acquisitions and other things that I think will be able to provide a very compelling end-to-end platform experience for a lot of enterprise customers. So um, that would probably be, I mean, and they're an older company, also,
Yeah, they've been
obviously.
around for
So
ages, right?
yeah, they've been around forever. I'm always interested in companies like all new cybersecurity companies are pretty interesting. You know, like of course they are. So I'm always like more fascinated in how does a company who's been doing kind of the same thing forever end up doing something new and interesting? Like that's fascinating to me, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of feel like the last few years have been really interesting in our space because there have been so many new companies coming in, and most of them are trying to do things different or take you take on things. I mean, who knows how this year will shake out in terms of the funding environment to keep some of them
Woo.
going. But I feel like there's so much going on in our space right now. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like 23 and 24 are going to be very like put your money where your mouth is kind of thing. I mean, it's companies are there's going to be a lot happening from an acquisition or investment or winding down or but yeah.
Well, we talked about one important day at a company, which is the starting, the founding of the company. Another important day is that day when you win your first real live paying customer. Take us back to that moment and tell us what happened.
Well, we had a design partner. It it was a first paying client for sure. It was what, November of 21 was our first paying customer. I mean, we weren't even a year old. Uh so that was pretty cool. Um it was a, like, I don't know what you, a token amount. What to say it was not a big deal would be an understatement. um
It was money though,
but
right? Real live
it was
cash.
money. It was money. Yeah. I got a physical check in the mail. I still have that check.
That's awesome.
Um yeah, I'll never get rid of it. So that, yeah, it was really cool. I think what's probably a better one, kind of one to talk about, would be we closed the six-figure deal, uh, which was our second deal, like 4 or 5 months later. And that was amazing. Uh, so that was, I think, when we were like, wow, this is a thing. Uh, so that was, you know, we went through a long like evaluation process. Um, we built a bunch of, you know capabilities that they wanted, which also were capabilities that other people were asking for. So it all kind of made sense. Um, but yeah, that was a big deal for us for sure.
And the second one, was that a design partner as well, or that they
Yeah.
were it
Yep.
was okay.
I mean, so that deal, like our product went GA in August of 2022. Uh, and both, and that deal closed in like June of 22, something like that. So we
Okay.
weren't even GA yet
Yeah.
in that neck of the woods, something like that. Uh, so yeah,
And then how do you think about the sales team that go to market then, Tom, and as you're building that site out? When did you know it was the right time to start hiring people?
we were basically, I mean, we probably hired, the person we originally brought in um, was doing more than sales also. So that was helpful. They were able to help with a number of different capabilities within the company from like an operational perspective. So it wasn't just out there carrying a bag and carrying a number kind of thing. That was part of it for sure. Uh, it was really once the product got to a place where we knew we were providing a significant amount of value, that was when we knew we had to start bringing people on board. So, and that's what we've done. So,
And then with that one person, let's just drill into that a little bit. So how did you manage that transition from you doing the work, right? You being the founder, leading the sales engagements, to I'm going to trust this person with more and more. you have to get the stuff out of your brain into their brain somehow. How did you manage that?
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that it really changed. You know, I'm still very involved in almost every opportunity we're working on to some extent. But it's really about just immersion in the problem. So, we have daily calls where we talk about what happened the day before, what's happening today, what worked, what didn't work. So we have a very strong, operational communication cadence when it comes to that. So, you know, I try to operate under this premise of giving the sales team everything they need. And what I mean by that is I don't want any excuses. As long as something's reasonable, like, okay, I need this piece of collateral, I need this customer testimonial, I need whatever, this blog, I'll do those things. Uh, However, I then expect results, right? So that's the kind of arrangement and deal I have with folks is, listen, if you need something, okay. But then these are the expectations. But yeah, that's a ever evolving process. And I think as we kind of hit the next phase of the company is when I'll probably begin to take a slight step back from a go to market perspective.
Is it hard to do that?
Yeah, I'm terrible at doing that. Um, I'm the furthest thing from like a micro managing person. I make the joke all the time, like everyone at this company is smarter than I am. So, which is true. But so the idea that I could even micromanage them is funny. Like, you know, but I am involved. I am involved in a lot. I could certainly take some lessons from like doing a better job at delegating some stuff. Um, what's happened for me has been it's just became a thing that happened organically, which is how things work best for me, right? Um, like it wasn't until the cup was overflowing until I realized that there was too much water in the cup.
Hmm.
That's how I am. Um, Even though I can see that the cup's filling up, like it's like I don't take action until I absolutely need to. So yeah, uh, but then that just creates you figure out what matters the most really, really fast whenever you have too many things to do. So, it kind of forces a automatic prioritization of certain things.
I love that idea of constraints force you to think about what's really important. I think, I worked at a startup once where it seemed like whenever we wanted money, we had money from various rounds. But I think it actually, held us back in many ways because there's lots of things that we were doing with hindsight that you wondered, why were we even doing that at that stage? And, someone made a good ask and there was money in the kitty and there's like, yeah, we'll give that a go. Whereas constraints force you to think about, well, what we can't do it all and we can't even do half of it. So what's the 10% we should be doing and how do we do it best? It's such a powerful lever to pull.
I mean, especially in this environment, man, it's yeah, it's tricky, and it's a lot of pressure. Uh, I think there's a big difference between stress and pressure, right? But there's lots of pressure for sure. Making the right decision, um, selling into the right market, talking to the right people. You know, we had a call yesterday about what's the next big feature we're going to build into the platform. And I mean, it's you can make a just really good argument for three of them. That we have customers asking for all three of them. Uh, and so it's like, so then the question becomes like, okay, is there a sequence of features that makes more sense? If we build this one, does it make building the second one easier and the third one easier? So you get into these, you have to really figure out which one matters most now, like right this second. And that's hard because then you're never going to make everyone happy. We're probably 18 to 24 months away from having everything that everyone wants, generally speaking, and then after that, it's just about refining things, I think. But that's how we really feel about how, because we've moved very fast from a product capability perspective. I mean, the team is just crazy. So, uh, you know, it's a good problem to have, but that doesn't make it not a problem.
Yeah, yeah. When you think about your go-to-market motions, when you're adding more customers, what's one thing you wish you could solve really easily overnight that's kind of bugging you?
The go to market is the problem in this space. So, you know what I mean? So there's a lot. It's not like, when people are like, well, Tom, isn't that always the problem at companies? And it's like, no, that's not always the problem at companies. Look at Cylance. Like, there was no question about what the go to market is going to be at Cylance, right? The former CTO of McAfee is now running an antivirus company, guys. I
Right.
think we understand how to go to market, right? We're going to leverage the channel, like blah 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 blah. That's not the case here. The go to market here is the tricky part. Like, how much time do you spend on product security versus enterprise customers? Where is the who's the best persona to sell into? Do people care about having an on-prem solution? So, I mean, I guess awareness that the problem is solvable, I guess, is maybe the one thing I would kind of fix. Is maybe that sounds like wildly generic, but we've talked to so many companies, and we show them the platform, and they just go, "We didn't even know this was a thing," uh, you know, and that's crazy to me at
Well,
this
I, I,
point.
I can
But
see that though, because they've worked for 20 years without it, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
they probably intuitively know it's something they should work on. But if we can't fix it, what's the point?
yep, yeah. So like, I've used this analogy with us multiple times around comparing us to EDR, for in a number of different ways. I remember the first time I saw an EDR solution, I was like, it like blew my mind. I was like, wow, I didn't even know that something like this was possible. This is great. Uh, and I think we're in a similar point in the market right now, right? Where EDR was, I think, probably fair to say, limping along for a number of years, and then it just went crazy.
Yeah.
Primarily due to the cloud-based nature of EDR that came around with companies like CrowdStrike and Cylance and SentinelOne. That was the big turning point. Nobody wanted to. I mean, lots of companies did, like Carbon Black was deploying EDR on like physical servers and stuff like that, but that was just kind of a pain. And that was just the only way to do it initially, so that was fine. And that's what I did, the company I was at. But I think that's the awareness of us and our capabilities is probably the big thing.
Well, let's flip things around, Tom. Is there a question for me about the go-to-market side, since we're talking about that I can have a stab at giving you some thoughts about?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I think is I'm curious about is what how do you see people targeting, like prospecting challenges and filling the pipeline as it comes to the change in remote work now. To me, I'm not a big fan of cold calling, and I think that's kind of I mean, I know there's entire companies built around cold calling, so obviously there's a use case for it. But for our specific go to market and sales motion, it seems not the best tactic for a number of reasons. So, what are you seeing in terms of reach out to people you haven't talked to before being successful? And we have a number of other things we do that work really well, but I'm curious what you've seen from other folks.
Yeah, I think there's 3,300 vendors in cybersecurity right now, right? And everyone's making their noise, usually by trying to use these traditional approaches of let's hire some SDRs, let's give them one of these tools to go and bombard people with emails and phone calls, and through attrition or luck or whatever, we might get some meetings booked in the back of it, right? But I think your observation is right, which is that in post COVID, where more people are working at home, but also I think just from being tapped out with just too much, those approaches are working less and less than they were maybe 2 or 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's interesting. So we're recording this on March 7th. This morning, I just released an interview with the CEO at Strata Identity, Eric Olden. And Eric has built and sold 2 companies in cybersecurity already. He's now in his 3rd. And at Strata, he had a rule as a seed company and a Series A company. No one is making cold calls and sending cold emails. Right? That was his rule. We're not doing that. And for the reason that you talked about, right? But they had a lot of inbound. And the reason that they had inbound is he doubled and tripled down on the company's ability to produce content and go and be known in the space that they're in. So he wrote himself a bunch of content. They spoke, they did podcasts, they did a whole bunch of things to go and evangelize the problem that they're solving. Not evangelize necessarily Strata itself, which comes by default, but to evangelize the problem that they're solving. And that helped get people to go, God, yeah, that sounds like my sort of company, It's what they talk about really hits home with me. Let's get in touch. And they obviously got their inbound through doing that. So I think one thing I would say is that if you are thinking about, as a company, that makes a ton of sense. Go and evangelize the problem. So if you get those people, whatever the number is, percentage of the audience, 50%, who didn't know it could be solved, you're going to hit them better by being incredibly active in the community and finding every damn reason you can to go and speak and talk and show up and shake hands and produce content that does all that for you. And then when you do have people who are on the hook for generating pipeline, whether they're SDRs, AEs, whoever might be in your process, what they can do is use that, right? They can say, there was Tom talking at this conference, or Mike talking at this conference, and listen to this section in minute 23 to minute 28. I think that's going to make a difference for you as the whatever you are at Honeywell, right? And here's why I think that, right? So you're actually giving a lot of context and relevance to why you're engaging with people, as opposed to just sending these blind cold things saying we should talk. You're actually helping your team by doing that kind of company strategy of doing it like that. So that's one thing I would say, if you're not doing it already, is figure that out. And I've seen companies hire people who are evangelists, and these are not not lacking in experience. Like at Cylance, you guys hired Malcolm Harkins, right? There's someone who's the sort of caliber of the person to hire, right? Known in the community, is not afraid to have a point of view, and go
certainly not.
No, right? Go talk about this. I talked to a CEO last year, and I've used this example a few times, but Snehal Antani, he is a CEO at Horizon 3.ai or Horizon 3, I think it is.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I talked to Snehal, and I was, started the conversation, and it was all kind of nice and pleasant. And he was formerly a CISO, right? And he decided to start his own company. And he used the phrase, all these chasm tools out there are snake oil, right? And I know that because I bought them all as a CISO, right? That makes you stop, right? You're like, whoa, hold on a minute. When you say snake oil, right? But it got the attention of people. And I think you need, in general, we as an industry need to be more bold in our claims and how we want to go out there and hire the people that can go out there and say, you know what? We're completely missing a whole vulnerability that we have. The belief is you can't do this. We're proving you can do it. And here's how easy it is to do. And by the way, you don't need to spend $500,000 on a consultant every couple of years to come and tell you the same thing, right? So someone, I believe, needs to get out there and just create some noise. Not be stupid about it, right? But make some noise that people stand up and listen and go, huh, right? And then your salespeople can use that as a way to do their outreach, right? And then when I think about outreach, I think one of the things that is happening right now is there is that movement away from let's send 1,000 emails and make 100 phone calls, right? What I would encourage people to do is say, look, you need to get hold of just 10 people this month or this week or this 2 weeks, whatever the sprint is, right? Let's get each of those people surrounded, is what I call it, right? So who do they know? Who do we know? What partners are involved? Where have they been before? Where have they talked before themselves? What can we do to sort of learn about that person so that when we are engaging with them, we'll stand out as people who A, know what we're talking about, and B, know them enough to be able to say, I'm pretty sure we're going to be relevant for you, and here's why. And having that, much more pinpoint, spearfish, you use a kind of analogy from our world, right? That's the bit that's going to make a difference as you're doing that. At that point, from there, you don't have to rely on cold call tactics. It might be introductions. You might realize that someone in your network knows them. That if you say who knows these 1,000 people, right? If you're like, yeah, whatever, right? But if you could have a thing in the company that says who knows these 5 people, then okay, well, let's figure out who knows these 5 people or who I know that might know them and things like that. And I think that's the
Yeah,
way to be relevant.
I think that's right. I think that's good feedback. Yeah, and we've certainly done a ton of that. I've done, boatloads of public speaking and podcasts and a number of other things. So, I think that works well. And man, I'm just not a big believer of the traditional marketing spend that exists in cybersecurity. And I think that's going away with what's happening in the venture space. Right, you're not able to raise like this crazy amount of capital anymore, and like growth at all costs is no longer the status quo. So like this idea that buying a bigger booth matters, like none of it matters. None of it matters. Like maybe at the top end it does, if like you're IBM and you want to know that the company you're buying from is, I don't know. But like I just see so much waste that goes on there. I mean, there's all the swag thing, which is just like who can spend the most money on cheap plastic things that everyone throws away. It's like, why? Like stuff like that just drives me nuts. Um, so like I have that mentality, like where guys, we're not giving out any swag that's like useless, right? So we have like beer koozies, the most useful piece of swag known to man. Right? Like, but like the idea that like here's a shitty pen, like like if you're gonna give out a pen, give out a great pen. It's like it's like stuff like that though. Like, or here's a personal hand fan that it's like what? Okay.
That
So
goes
that
that goes straight into the hotel room trash can right there.
exactly, and it's just so much waste and time and energy for no value. So I think and I think that's a good thing at the end of the day. Like being more conservative with capital and not spending it frivolously is better for everyone.
I think that's a great thing, and that's as you say, part of the constraints that are going to come down is these are things that are going to be pretty easy to cross off that line in the spreadsheet, right? It's like nope, 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 right? But here's the 5 things we think actually might be able to drive some value for us.
Yep.
A quick aside. I remember last year, I think probably a year ago, when things were still frothy, this pretty early stage company had a job advertised, and I think they had less than 100 employees. They had a job advertised for a swag manager. And I was thinking, how much swag are you giving out? You need to employ someone full time to do that. It just seemed a little bit nuts to me.
It's baffling.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Well, listen.
Imagine saying that in the board meeting. Like, yeah, we just hired a swag hand. Like, what? What did you do?
Yeah, the thing. We need some help hiring some people. We need a new this. We need to get a new VP of engineering. We need to get a swag manager. Like, whoa, a swag manager.
Yeah. Sorry, hold on.
Anyway, Tom, listen, I've loved this conversation. If someone wants to get in touch and keep it going with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's always the best approach. Thomas Pace on there. I'm on like Twitter and stuff, but I don't do anything. I don't do anything on social media really. But my Twitter handle is at Tommy Pastry. And yeah, reach out. Emails thomas.pace@netrise.io.
Okay. And are you planning, even though we just talked about the waste of time and money, are you planning any events this year, such as big as Black Hat or even RSA?
Yeah, I mean, we'll be at both of those events. Like we're not doing a booth at RSA. We'll have one at Black Hat. So, but we have a ton of like dinners and more like strategic things like that. Relying on a bunch of partnerships we have with much bigger companies. So that's another angle we've taken. So yeah, but we will be at those events for sure.
Awesome. Well, I encourage everyone to look out for you guys there and connect and learn more about what NetRise is doing. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I really enjoyed that interview with Tom. What a compelling person he is, working, creating NetRise with his co-founder to make a big impact. I had three takeaways that come to mind immediately. One is this idea that they're tackling an underserved part of the market. With all the hype right now about cloud security and all the players jump into all the sub markets in cloud, sometimes it's the what might be seen the more boring parts of the market where you can actually have a bigger impact, right? And tackling things that have been assumed in the past can't be fixed, won't be fixed, shouldn't be fixed, whatever it might be, and actually coming in with a fresh approach and a fresh pair of eyes from modern days as opposed to things that were thought of 10, 15 years ago, can sometimes have a really big impact. And I think that's what NetRise is doing and what they're going to have the biggest impact. Second thing that I took away was, and I asked Tom about the advice and the support that he got early on. He said, the idea that you can do this on your own is ludicrous, right? And he listed out all those people that had been advisors and connectors and people that came in to help them out in some way. I think is so important, especially as a first-time founder, having people that have done this before. Coming in and giving that advice is so important. And he said, even like his old boss at Cylance had done a couple of companies before and were able to give advice. Stu McClure was giving advice. JJ Guy was giving advice. All these people were the ones that were helping out. And as he said, I think he said specifically for JJ Guy, if it wasn't for him, NetRise might not exist because he was the one that delivered a whole bunch of introductions to the VC world, so they got their first round of funding. And then I think the third takeaway for me was what we talked about at the end there. Being different and being bold is so important when we think not just about the product, but also how we go to market. Too often I think what we do is we kind of default to the old ways, default to what we think is proven. And it might have been proven 10 years ago, but it might not be proven right now, right? And that whole thing about, we need to get a bunch of SDRs and we need to start getting some A's on board, and then they'll just pound the market. I think anytime you think different to that is going to pay off at the moment. There's not many companies in cybersecurity right now, certainly startups, who are deploying a bunch of SDRs and seeing an incredible return from that. They're either failing or they're working okay, and very few are stellar performances. So thinking about with a constrained budget and resources, what can you do to be different is where things might pay off. And a phrase I've heard and used myself in the past is different is better than better, right? And using that, let's be different, let's be bold, and try and get more than our fair share of attention out there, I think is going to really pay off. So that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed chatting to Tom, hearing about his views, what's going on at NetRise, how they're thinking about this part of the market. And I wish them every success for the events they're doing this year at Black Hat and also at RSA and for 2023 and beyond.